1,943, 30,000 feet above the frozen, sprawling landscape of Germany. The air is thin, razor-sharp, and painfully cold. For a young Luftwaffe ace, a veteran of 100 dogfights in his Messerschmitt Bf 109, this is his domain. He is a hunter in his natural element, the apex predator of this high-altitude killing field. Through the armored glass of his canopy, he spots his prey, and a smirk of confident disdain crosses his lips. It is the Gabelschwanz Teufel, the fork-tailed devil, the American P-38 Lightning. It is unlike anything else in the sky. 2 fuselages, 2 engines, a central pod for the pilot and guns. To the German pilots, steeped in the tradition of nimble, single-engine dogfighters, the Lightning is an absurdity. It looks gangly, oversized, and impossibly clumsy. It seems to lumber through the air, lacking the grace of a Spitfire or the predatory sleekness of their own Messerschmitts. It is, they believe, an easy kill. A fat, slow target designed by committees and fools who did not understand the brutal, intimate ballet of aerial combat. The German ace banks his fighter, the sunlight glinting off its wings. His plan is simple, a textbook maneuver he has executed dozens of times. He will dive from the sun, unseen, and exploit the P-38's notoriously poor roll rate. He will get on its tail, aim for one of its 2 large, vulnerable liquid-cooled engines, and send it spiraling down in a plume of glycol and flame. The kill will be quick, efficient, and another victory mark will be painted on his rudder. He begins his dive, the hum of his Daimler-Benz engine rising to a predatory scream. He closes the distance, lining up the shot. But something is wrong. The P-38 isn't reacting as it should. It seems to be flying quietly. He should have heard the roar of its twin Allison engines by now, but the sky is strangely silent. Before he can process this, the American plane makes a sudden, impossible move. It doesn't bank or loop. It seems to pivot, almost in place, its nose whipping around with a speed that defies physics. In a horrifying split second, the roles are reversed. The hunter is now the hunted. The German ace finds himself staring directly into the nose of the P-38. And in that nose, he sees a terrifying concentration of firepower. 4 50 caliber machine guns and a 20mm cannon, all clustered together. There is a flash of brilliant, winking light and a stream of lead and cannon shells. A solid, unwavering buzzsaw of death rips through his cockpit. He never even knew what hit him. Across the skies of Europe, this shocking scene was beginning to repeat itself. The German aces, the masters of the sky, had catastrophically underestimated the fork-tailed devil. They had mistaken its unconventional design for a flaw. They were about to learn, in the most brutal way possible, that its twin engines and strange configuration were not a weakness, but a calculated and deadly advantage. To understand the P-38, you must first understand that it was never designed to be a dogfighter in the classic sense. It was the brainchild of one of aviation's greatest minds, Clarence Kelly Johnson of Lockheed. In 1937, the U.S. Army Air Corps issued a daunting set of requirements for a new aircraft. They wanted a high-altitude interceptor, a plane that could climb to 20,000 feet in under 6 minutes, fly at over 360 miles per hour, and possess enough range and firepower to protect the vast coastlines of the United States from fleets of high-flying enemy bombers that, at the time, didn't even exist. It was a request for a fantasy aircraft, something far beyond the capabilities of current technology. Most manufacturers submitted conventional, single-engine designs. Kelly Johnson and his team at Lockheed took a radical, different path. They realized that no single existing engine could provide the power needed to meet these demands. The solution, therefore, was to use two. This decision dictated the P-38's bizarre and iconic shape. The twin Allison V-1710 engines were mounted in their own fuselages, or booms, which also housed the turbo-superchargers and landing gear. The pilot sat in a central nacelle that also contained the armament. This design offered a series of brilliant, if unconventional, solutions. By placing all the guns in the nose, Johnson eliminated the need for convergence firing. On a traditional fighter with wing-mounted guns, the guns had to be angled to converge at a specific point in front of the aircraft. A pilot had to be at that precise range to do maximum damage, but the P-38's guns fired straight ahead in a dense, concentrated stream. Anything that flew into that stream at any range would be shredded. The twin engines, each equipped with a General Electric turbo-supercharger, were the key to high-altitude performance. These devices used the engine's exhaust gases to spin a turbine, compressing the thin, cold air at altitude and forcing it into the engine, allowing it to maintain its sea-level power far into the stratosphere. On paper, the P-38 was a world-beater, a technological marvel. It was, in theory, the perfect interceptor. Theory, however, has a nasty habit of colliding with reality. When the P-38 Lightning first arrived in the European Theatre of Operations, ETO, its debut was nothing short of a disaster. The pilots, many of them trained in tactics suited for nimble, single-engine fighters, tried to dogfight with the Luftwaffe's best. They engaged in turning battles with the agile Bf 109 seconds and 4 190 seconds, and they were slaughtered. The P-38's flaws, which were manageable in other theaters, became glaring liabilities in the high-altitude, high-intensity air war over Europe. The first major issue was compressibility. In a high-speed dive, as the aircraft approached the speed of sound, airflow over the thick wings would become turbulent, causing the controls to lock up. The pilot would be trapped in a terrifying, ever-steepening dive with no way to pull out. Many were lost before engineers developed dive flaps to counteract the effect. The Allison engines, while powerful, were also vulnerable. They were liquid-cooled, and a single stray bullet puncturing the coolant line could cause the engine to overheat and seize within minutes. German pilots quickly learned to aim for the P-38's large, exposed engine nacelles. Furthermore, the early models were plagued with problems. The cockpit heating was notoriously ineffective, leaving pilots to suffer from frostbite in the -40-degree temperatures of high altitude. This wasn't just uncomfortable, it was debilitating, leading to fatigue and slowed reaction times in the heat of combat. The Luftwaffe aces, observing these struggles, developed a playbook for killing the fork-tailed devil. They saw a large, unmaneuverable target with a poor roll rate and vulnerable engines. Their confidence soared. They believed they had the measure of this strange American machine. The P-38 quickly gained a reputation as a widowmaker in the ETO. The losses were so severe that at one point, General Jimmy Doolittle considered withdrawing the aircraft from the theater entirely. The perfect interceptor was proving to be a catastrophic failure. In the smoke-filled ready rooms of Luftwaffe fighter wings like Gabelschwanz 2 and 26, the masters of the German air war crafted and disseminated a clear and concise doctrine for destroying the P-38 Lightning. It was a strategy built on a foundation of contempt, but backed by bloody experience. The Americana is a fool. A veteran ace would brief a fresh-faced rookie. He brings a truck to a knife fight. Do not fear the Gabelschwanz. It is a beast of burden, not a bird of prey. You must be the hawk. The first rule was to never, ever engage the P-38 head-on. This was the one thing the veterans quickly learned to fear. Its concentrated nose armament was a shotgun blast that required no skill, only a steady hand. Only a fool jousts the devil, the saying went. The core of the German playbook was to exploit the P-38's two critical weaknesses, its poor roll rate and its large size. The preferred method of attack was the classic boom and zoom from above and behind, preferably out of the sun. The German pilot would use his altitude advantage to dive on the unsuspecting Lightning, fire a quick, lethal burst at one of its engines, and then use his speed to climb away before the P-38's wingman could react. If caught on the same level, the tactic was to force the P-38 into a rolling scissors maneuver. By constantly changing the direction of the turn, the nimbler German fighters could use their superior roll rate to get onto the P-38's tail. The Lightning, fighting to bring its guns to bear, would seem to wallow, unable to keep up with the rapid changes in direction. The German pilots were taught to see the P-38 not as a single entity, but as a collection of targets. The long, vulnerable booms that housed the engines and coolant systems were prime targets. The central nacelle, while small, was where the pilots sat. But the engines were the favored aiming point. Disabling one engine would cripple the aircraft, making it a slow, easy kill for the rest of the pack. They saw the twin engines not as a strength, but as two large, convenient bullseyes. For a time, this playbook worked with deadly effectiveness. The Germans were confident, their strategy was sound, and the P-38 seconds were falling from the sky. The first crack in the foundation of German confidence came from the P-38's most obvious and brutal advantage: its firepower. A German pilot who made the mistake of misjudging a head-on pass would experience something for which his training had not prepared him. On a conventional fighter like the Bf-109, The Spitfire, or the P-51, the guns were mounted in the wings. To be effective, these guns had to be harmonized or converged. Armorers on the ground would angle the guns slightly inward so that their streams of fire would cross at a predetermined distance, say 300 yards. This created an optimal kill zone, a single point in space where the firepower was concentrated. A pilot had to be a master of deflection shooting and range estimation to get his enemy into that precise spot at the right moment. The P-38 had no such limitations. Its 4 50 caliber machine guns and one 20mm Hispano cannon were all clustered in the nose, less than a foot apart. There was no need for convergence. The projectiles flew in a tight, parallel stream, a dense cone of destructive energy that was just as effective at 600 yards as it was at 100. It was, as one pilot described it, like firing a shotgun. Another called it a buzzsaw of Armageddon. German pilots, accustomed to the streams of tracers from wing-mounted guns, would see this solid wall of lead and cannon shells coming at them and simply disintegrate. There was no dodging it. Entire wings could be sawn off, cockpits obliterated. This overwhelming firepower began to command a grudging respect. The first rule of the German playbook, avoid a head-on pass, was not just a suggestion. It was a commandment written in the blood of their comrades. It was the first sign that the fork-tailed devil had a vicious bite. The second deadly advantage of the P-38 was far more subtle and far more unnerving. It was an auditory ghost. The Allison V-1000 710 engines were equipped with General Electric turbo-superchargers, a technological marvel that gave the P-38 its superb, high-altitude performance. But these devices had an unintended side effect. They acted as highly effective mufflers. A German pilot flying his Bf-109 was accustomed to the sound of aerial combat. The throaty, unsynchronized roar of a Rolls-Royce Merlin engine in a Spitfire or a P-51 was distinctive. He could often hear his enemy before he could see him, but the P-38 was different. The exhaust gases, instead of venting directly into the atmosphere with a thunderous roar, were first routed through the turbines of the superchargers. This process dampened the sound, giving the P-38 a strange, quiet, and deeply unsettling engine note. Luftwaffe pilots began reporting eerie encounters. They would be patrolling, scanning the empty sky, feeling secure, when suddenly their aircraft would be rocked by explosions. A P-38 would flash past them, guns blazing, having appeared as if from nowhere. It was a stealth fighter before the age of stealth. This auditory camouflage gave American pilots a massive tactical advantage, especially when attacking German bomber formations. They could sneak up on the escorts, get into firing position, and unleash their devastating nose armament before the Germans even knew they were under attack. The fork-tailed devil was not just a strange-looking brute. It was a silent killer. This was the trick that shattered the German playbook and turned the P-38's biggest perceived weakness, its twin engines, into its most brilliant tactical weapon. The scene played out countless times. confounding some of the best aces in the Luftwaffe. A German pilot is on the tail of a P-38. He's in the perfect position, following the American through a gentle, banking turn. He knows the P-38 is not a nimble aircraft. Its turn radius is wide. He tightens his own turn, creeping inside the P-38's arc, lining up his guns for the kill shot. The American pilot, seemingly desperate, continues his wide, predictable turn. The German smiles. This is too easy. And then the P-38 pilot does something insane. He reaches down and deliberately shuts down one of his engines, usually the one on the inside of the turn. The effect is instantaneous and violent. The live engine, still at full power, acts as a pivot point. The P-38, which was moments before wallowing in a wide, slow turn, suddenly snaps around in a brutally tight, almost flat spin. For the German pilot, it's as if the laws of physics have been momentarily suspended. The target that was filling his gun sight is suddenly gone, and in its place is the terrifying gun-filled nose of the P-38, now on his tail. The hunter has become the hunted in the blink of an eye. By using this asymmetric thrust, skilled American pilots could perform maneuvers that were simply impossible for any single-engine fighter. They turned the twin-engine configuration from a liability into a secret weapon, a trump card that could reverse a hopeless situation. The transformation of the P-38 from a widowmaker to a feared predator was not just about the plane, it was about the pilots. The early losses forced a radical rethinking of American fighter doctrine. Pilots, like the legendary Robin Olds, who would become a triple ace, learned to stop fighting the enemy's fight. They stopped trying to turn with BF 109 seconds. They became energy fighters. They embraced a new doctrine, boom and zoom. They would use the P-38's superior speed and climb rate to dictate the terms of the engagement. They would climb high above the German formations, pick a target, and then dive on it at incredible speed. They would make a single, devastating pass, unleashing the buzzsaw of their nose guns, and then use their momentum to climb back up to the safety of high altitude before the enemy could react. They learned to use the P-38 as it was designed, not as a fencer's foil, but as a jouster's lance. It was about managing energy, altitude, and speed. They broke the old rules of dogfighting and wrote new ones. They learned to work in teams, with one P-38 making a pass while its wingman covered it from above. They became masters of their unconventional machine, turning its weaknesses into strengths and its strengths into overwhelming advantages. By 1944, the tide had turned. The German aces, who had once mocked the Gabelschwanz Teufel, now treated it with a deep and fearful respect. Insult was now spoken with a note of grudging awe. The instructions passed down to new pilots changed dramatically. The P-38 was no longer listed as an easy kill. It became a priority target, an aircraft to be approached with extreme caution. The new German playbook was based on fear. Do not let the lightning get above you. Be wary of its silent approach. If one begins a wide turn, do not follow it. It is a trap. In post-war interviews, Luftwaffe aces like Adolf Galland and Günter Roll would express their profound respect for the P-38 and the pilots who flew it. They acknowledged its devastating firepower and its surprising maneuverability in the hands of a skilled pilot. They admitted that they had underestimated it, and they had paid a heavy price for their arrogance. The fork-tailed devil had earned its name, not as a caricature, but as a symbol of a deadly and unpredictable foe. The story of the P-38 Lightning in Europe is a powerful lesson in the nature of warfare and innovation. It was not the best dogfighter of the war. In a classic, low-altitude turning fight, a Spitfire or an FW-190 could still fly circles around it. But war is not a series of one-on-one duels. The P-38 proved to be the perfect weapon for the specific challenges of the ETO. Its long range allowed it to escort bombers deep into Germany, a feat no other fighter could accomplish until the arrival of the P-51 Mustang. Its high-altitude performance made it a lethal threat to the Luftwaffe, where they were strongest. Its rugged, twin-engine design gave its pilots immense confidence. They knew they could absorb damage that would down a single-engine fighter and still have a chance to limp home. This psychological edge cannot be overstated. In the end, the P-38's unconventional design, the very thing its enemies saw as a crippling flaw, became its greatest asset. It was a machine that rewarded intellect and discipline over brute instinct. It forced its pilots to become smarter, more tactical thinkers. They couldn't rely on raw agility, so they relied on speed, altitude, firepower, and cunning. The fork-tailed devil was a calculated risk, a gamble on a radical design that paid off in spectacular fashion. It stands as a testament to the ingenuity of its creators, and more importantly, to the adaptability and courage of the pilots who learned to tame the beast and unleash its full, terrifying potential upon